Hello, brick sculptors, and welcome back to Brick Sculpt. This is Chris, and today we're going to be talking about applied SNOT theory, specifically to windows, doors, and facades. Now, if you watch my videos regularly, I did a video about a week ago on the exact same topic, but with jumper plates and jumper theory. And this is going to be very similar, but just with a completely different technique. If you want to watch my jumper plate video, I'll link that here, as well as at the end if you want to watch it after. If you haven't seen my video on SNOT theory and you're new to SNOT technique, you might want to watch that first. I'll link that here, but if you don't want to, you can watch it at the end as well. I'll link it there as well. A lot of the techniques I cover in this video will be expanded on what I covered in that first SNOT video. If you're completely new to SNOT, SNOT stands for studs not on top, and that's what we're talking about today. Now, this little model you see in front of you here is something I built up for the jumper plate video, and it basically shows that putting windows and doors in a wall adds some nice detail, but once you turn it, it's incredibly flat and boring. And that's what we're trying to get away from here and add depth and detail to our building facades, windows, and doors. This wall here that I did up in white, I did for the jumper plate video, and I showed how you can add texture using jumper plates. And I'm going to do the exact same thing in this video, but instead of using jumpers, we're using all SNOT technique. Now before we get too into SNOT building techniques for windows and doors, let's go ahead and talk about some rules, because SNOT technique does have some rules that need to be followed. So if you watched my SNOT theory video, you know that SNOT technique throws a big hiccup in a lot of stuff. It can be super helpful and it can add so much detail, but you have to know how it works. And you're dealing with different measurements. I go in a lot more depth in it in that video than I'm going to do in this one. But let's talk about some of that and how it applies to windows, doors, and facades. So this little thing I built up here is a basic wall with different SNOT pieces plugged into it. So from the side profile, you can see I have 3 different depths of parts on this wall. This one here is sunk into the wall, this one's flush with the wall, and this one sticks out from the wall. And all of these are mounted using SNOT technique, just different pieces. This first one is mounted on the classic headlight brick, probably the first SNOT piece to be created, or one of, and super handy to this day, although it does have some limitations. The next one here is your more classic SNOT brick, where the studs are just flush to the outside of the brick. And then here you have kind of your pop-out or hangover style, where they stick out in front of the wall. So here we're recessed a half a plate into the wall, flush to the wall, and sticking out half a plate outside of the wall. Now when doing SNOT technique for detail, I like to use all 3 of these different techniques to really mix up the texture and make the parts stand out different from each other, because they're all at just very slight different degrees of sticking out. So you can really add a ton of detail in that way. As well as having different depths sticking out from the wall, the pieces also have different orientations depending on what you're using. For example, I want to call this a top-aligned SNOT brick. And what that means is, a typical brick, as we know, is 3 plates tall. You may not know, a plate is 2.5 plates wide. And so that means we have a half plate difference if we put it into a SNOT technique. And I call this one top aligned because this tile lines up with the top of the brick, but not the bottom. Now we also have bottom aligned, and that's going to look like this, where the tile is flush to the bottom, but not the top. It may look like it from the front, but this is actually lower, and this is only 2 plates high. If we add a third, we now have a half plate sticking over the top. Now these 2 pieces can cancel themselves out if you put them together like that, but there is a third type of piece, which I'll call both aligned, and that's something like this. Now you'll notice a both aligned piece is 2 studs tall, or 2 SNOT studs tall, 5 plates tall, or 1 2/3 bricks tall. And that's where the trick lies. Ones that are flush top and bottom have to be in pairs, because if you have 2.5 plate and 2.5 plate, that equals 5 plates. You can have 5 plates tall here, but it's not equal to 2 bricks. It's actually shorter by 1 brick. That's why you can make these guys cancel out. But if you want it flush on both, you do have to have even numbers. Now this will also apply if we build vertically. These are all horizontal techniques. But let's say we're building vertically. Here we have a stack of SNOT bricks with a 1x8 tile on it, running the whole length. And it fits perfectly. It's completely flush at the top, completely flush at the bottom. If we did want to mount this on something, we may have to add a plate at the bottom, depending on what our setup is. So that could throw things off unless you build it into the base that you're working with. But it does line up flush on both. So this would pair well with something like this, maybe like this, but probably not so well like this because there's a gap. But there's also other ways to do this. For example, here we have the same 1x8 tile, but it's placed differently on the SNOT technique. It hangs over by a half plate on top, and it's short a half plate on the bottom. And the technique I use for this were single SNOT bricks, and in between each, I have 2 plates to get the right spacing. Now you might be saying, well, this is going to throw everything off because it's not flush on top or bottom. But it depends how you're combining it in your SNOT technique. For example, if this is your base, this lines up perfectly. If this is going to be the top of your building, it also lines up perfectly. So it just depends if you need to cancel out that half plate distance or not. Now, as far as building vertically with SNOT, there is one more rule that you should consider, and that is the heights that you're working with. So this is an 8 long tile, and you have 8 SNOT studs here. 8 SNOT studs, if it's flush at the top and the bottom, is equivalent to 20 plates tall. Each of these 2 stud bricks is 5 plates tall, shorter than 2 bricks tall, keep in mind. But this is 20 plates tall, so 20 plates equals 8 SNOT studs. 6 SNOT studs, 15 plates. 4 SNOT studs is 10 plates. And 2 SNOT studs is 5 plates. Now, why am I mentioning all this? Because these are all even numbers. When you use odd numbers, it gets a lot more difficult, and it can really mess with your technique. For example, if it was only 7 SNOT studs, 17.5 plates. 5 SNOT studs, 12.5 plates. 3 SNOT studs, 7.5 plates, and 1 SNOT stud is 2.5 plates. So something to think about when you're building with this technique. Well, let's go ahead and talk about some different techniques and textures we can make. This is a pretty cool one. This is a wall built of all SNOT bricks, and we just tiled it with ingots. I used 1x1 tiles on the end because they don't make 1x1 ingots, so we could stagger them. But it makes for a really awesome texture in a big block wall. Lots you could do with that, and that can make for a really cool facade on a building. You could also make siding out of this. Basically, I just used all top-aligned, flush SNOT bricks and tiled it. And the whole building is SNOT bricks. And all the pieces just stick off the front like that. I did use some jumper plates in here to kind of bring the window sills out. You don't have to do that, but you can. And the door is nice and recessed. So another technique you can use, all using SNOT bricks. As for windows, you can do lots of different creative things. You can do different side techniques, by putting SNOT bricks on the side. You can do things down in the bottom, like put ledges. Same thing, SNOT bricks down here. And you can really build out and get real decorative. I've seen so many cool different designs people incorporate here. Lots of different stuff you can do with SNOT. And really, you're just building outward. So you can kind of do whatever you want and really play around and get a lot of detail. When you talk SNOT versus jumper in building techniques like this, I think SNOT is a lot more versatile, but I think jumper shouldn't be discredited. I think the best answer to getting the most detail is use both, because you can really do a lot of different stuff then if you're incorporating both techniques into one build. So here's a couple examples I made of some flower boxes and different awnings, and these are all using SNOT technique. There's different textures you can do up top. I've got a little curved double slope here. Some of these little rounded tiles sticking down with jumper plates on top. Just a couple of double cheese slopes up here makes for a nice little awning. And these window boxes I think turned out awesome. Lots of SNOT technique going on here. I can pull these off and kind of show you what I did. So this one's mounted on headlight bricks. And it has a second row of headlight bricks with a plate on the bottom and a tile on the front, and then I just plugged in some different flowers and kind of arranged them so they stick outward and don't hit the wall. That was a little tricky. And I think it looks like a nice full window box. This one's pretty much the same box, but I built it on standard SNOT bricks that don't stick out or don't recess into the wall. And pretty much the same box here, a little different flowers. These use the Lego Friends flowers. I think that one turned out cool as well. This one's a little bit larger and uses a double SNOT brick down there. And then some other SNOT bricks positioned upward with some cheese slopes on them. And flowers. So a lot of cool stuff you can do with this. The possibilities with SNOT technique are really endless. So I just wanted to show you some different ideas here. I want to get back to this first building I showed you and talk about some of the techniques I used in here, because I tried to make a point in this layout to use all the 3 different depths of SNOT technique. So I've got a trim around the door and a trim on each edge and the top. These are all built on just standard SNOT bricks, where they just stick out when they just stick flush to the front of the building. As far as the bottom row here in dark gray, this is all built to be recessed in a half a plate deeper than the trim. And I used individual bricks. I thought it looked like a cool kind of pattern looking like masonry. But these are recessed in, so it's a little bit deeper in than this, which gives it a really nice look. And then up here in the awning, I used the pop-out SNOT bricks to make it stick out a little bit further. And you can put these things right next to each other too to just make tons of different detailed pieces and add all kinds of detail to your builds. Well, I hope you found this helpful. I hope you learned a thing or two, and if you have any other suggestions or things I missed, please leave them below in the comments. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, because I'm going to do more just like it in the future. And if you want to watch either my jumper plate video, I'll have that linked at the end, as well as my original SNOT theory video. That'll be linked at the end as well. That's all for this time, and we will see you next time.